Centuries ago, a beast fell in love with the one meant to break his curse. Now the forest still whispers their names beneath the moon. Because some loves never die. They only change their shape, mist coiled through the pines like living breath, whispering secrets to the trees. The villagers of Eleron always said the forest was cursed, that its roots grew over the bones of the dead, and its rivers ran with memory. No one entered the Moonvale woods after dusk. No one except Eli. The moon hung pale and wide above her, silvering her hair and the hem of her cloak as she stepped beyond the final line of lanterns. The air grew colder here, heavy with the scent of rain and moss. She tightened her grip on the small brass lantern she carried, its flame trembling in the fog like a frightened heart. She wasn't supposed to be here, not tonight. Her father lay fevered in bed, his breath shallow and ragged. The apothecary had said only one thing could save him, a rare blossom that bloomed once each year under the full moon, deep within the forbidden forest. And so she came, because fear could not outweigh love. Every step was a prayer. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful. But this was no wolf's domain. There were older things here, things that the villagers had tried to forget. Elara pressed on, her lantern flickering as the trees thickened around her. She moved carefully, whispering soft words to the spirits her grandmother had taught her to respect. Moon above, guide my steps. Shadows below, grant me peace. The forest seemed to listen. When she reached a clearing, she stopped. There it was, the lunaflower. Its petals glowed faintly blue, swaying though there was no wind. It grew from the heart of an old stone altar, cracked with age and covered in strange runes. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward, slowly, reverently, and knelt before the flower. "Thank you," she whispered to the moonlight, and reached out to pluck it. That's when the growl came. Low, deep. It rolled through the air like thunder buried in the earth. Ilara froze. Her hand trembled above the flower. She turned and saw eyes, golden, enormous, burning like suns through the mist. Her lantern light caught the shape behind them, massive shoulders, the glint of scales, and something like fur shifting in the dark. It was as if shadow itself had taken form and learned to breathe. She stumbled back, her lantern swinging wildly. The creature stepped forward, and for the briefest moment, she saw him clearly. He was not merely beast. He was ruin, made flesh, half dragon, half vulture. The remnants of armor fused into his hide like scars of a forgotten war. His breath steamed in the air. His wings were torn, one bound in chains that clinked softly as he moved. And yet, his eyes held sorrow, not hunger. Ilara's pulse thundered. Her instincts screamed to run, but something deeper, older, whispered, "Stay." "Who trespasses?" the creature rumbled in the forest of forgotten names. His voice wasn't just sound. It was vibration, deep enough to make her bones hum. I came for the flower," she stammered, clutching the lunaflower to her chest. "My father is dying. I meant no harm." The beast tilted his head, the motion strangely human. His claws scraped against stone as he circled her. "So they still send their children to steal from me," he said softly. "Do your kind never learn?" Elara took a trembling breath. "If you mean to kill me, please, let me send this flower home first. It might save him." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Only the distant drip of water from the trees broke it. Then, to her shock, the beast laughed. It was not cruel, but hollow, weary, like wind through ruins. "You do not fear me." Ilara met his gaze, heart pounding. "Should I?" "Yes," he said simply. "And yet you do not." He stepped closer, until the heat of his breath brushed her face. His scent was wild, smoke, rain, and earth after thunder. "Take your flower, little mortal. But know this, you owe me a debt. One day you will return." Ilara swallowed hard. "And if I don't, then I will come for you." Something ancient stirred in his voice, a binding, a promise. The air thickened with unseen power. Ilara nodded slowly. "Then I will return." The beast's eyes glowed brighter for a heartbeat. "Go," he whispered, "before I remember what I once was." She turned and ran through the mist, through the silence, through the weight of 1,000 watching shadows. When she finally crossed the threshold of the forest, the first light of dawn broke over the hills. She fell to her knees, clutching the Luna flower, breathless and trembling. Behind her, the forest whispered, not with malice, but with something like longing. And far within the Moonvale woods, the beast watched from his cave, a strange ache stirring in his chest. He did not yet know her name, but her courage burned in his mind like moonfire. The forest seemed to breathe differently after that night. Ilara could feel it, the way the wind carried whispers when she walked near the tree line, how the moon seemed to burn brighter when her gaze lingered too long on the hills. A week passed before her father's fever broke. The Luna flower had worked its nectar, shining like liquid moonlight as it touched his lips. He slept for 3 days, and when he woke, his first words were her name. The village called it a miracle. Ilara knew better. She should have been relieved, grateful, at peace, but she was not. Every night she dreamed of golden eyes glimmering through the fog. She would wake with her heart pounding and the echo of a voice in her mind. "You owe me a debt." She tried to ignore it, tried to bury herself in work, in the rhythm of tending herbs and mixing tinctures. But the forest called to her, softly, insistently, until one moonlit evening she could bear it no longer. With her lantern once more in hand, Ilara stepped beyond the edge of light and into the Moonvale woods. This time the mist parted for her. The trees leaned away, as though recognizing her, and somewhere deep within, the beast was waiting. He heard her long before he saw her. Footsteps, light but determined, echoing through his hollow world. The scent of her, faint and wild, drifted to where he rested among the ruins of his lair. For centuries he had dwelled here, beneath the waterfall's endless song. The air was cool and damp, filled with the scent of stone and moss. Runes glowed faintly on the cavern walls, old magic fading with time. Once this had been his fortress. Once he had been a man, a knight, sworn to serve the moon goddess herself, until pride had damned him. Now he was the echo of that sin, fur and fang and fire chained together, doomed to guard the forest he had betrayed. The sound of her breath reached him. Soft, he rose slowly, the weight of chains clinking around his wing. When she stepped into the cavern's light, she froze. The beast stood near the heart of the chamber, illuminated by the reflection of the waterfall. His body shimmered faintly, silver light tracing over scales and scars. A broken crown of bone curved from his brow. He looked both terrible and magnificent. a creature caught between damnation and divinity. You came back, he said, voice echoing like thunder in a storm-wrapped valley. I said I would, Ilara answered. Her voice trembled, but she did not step back. Few mortals keep their word, he murmured. Fewer still come willingly. Ilara took a breath. You spared my life, I thought. I should thank you. He tilted his head, golden eyes narrowing. Gratitude, that is new to me. She set her lantern down and looked around, the walls carved with symbols, the faint hum of power in the air. This place feels alive. It is bound to me, the beast replied, as I am bound to it. My curse feeds on the land, and the land feeds on me. When I wither, so does it. Ilara frowned. That's not a curse, that's a prison. The beast's growl was low, but there was pain in it. It was mercy once. Now it is only memory. She stepped closer, studying him, the way his armor seemed grown into his flesh, the way his claws trembled faintly when he moved. She realized, with a pang of awe and pity, that he hurt simply by existing. May I see? She asked quietly. He blinked. Your wounds. His laugh was soft, bitter. They are not meant for mortal eyes. Maybe not, she said, but I'm a healer. I might not break curses, but I know pain when I see it. For a moment, silence reigned. Then he bowed his head slightly, a gesture of ancient habit. As you wish. She approached slowly and touched the edge of one of his chains. It was cold as death, etched with glowing runes. When her fingers brushed it, light flickered, faint, warm, alive. The beast inhaled sharply. Her touch did not burn him. It soothed. What are you doing? He asked hoarsely. Listening, she whispered. Every wound tells a story. He turned his face away. Mine are written in blood. Then let me read them. Her words fell like a spell. The air shimmered faintly. For a moment, a heartbeat. A breath, his monstrous form blurred, and she saw a man's silhouette beneath it, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in broken armor and sorrow. Then the illusion snapped, and the beast stepped back, his wings flaring wide. Enough. Ilara's hand fell to her side. I'm sorry. Do not be. His voice was quiet, almost tender. You saw more than most ever do. That is enough. They stood in silence for a while, the sound of falling water between them. Finally, she spoke again. Will the curse ever end? Perhaps, he said, if I find forgiveness or love. He said the word as if it were poison. Ilara's heart ached. And have you tried? His golden eyes met hers. Once, long ago. It did not end well. He turned away, and for the first time, Ilara saw the depth of his loneliness, a being who had lived too long, loved once, and lost everything. Without thinking, she said softly, then perhaps it's time you tried again. The beast froze. For the briefest instant, the runes on the walls flared brighter, as if the forest itself had heard her. That night, after she left the lair, the moonlight followed her home. The forest no longer felt hostile. It felt watchful. And far within his cavern, the beast sat in silence, staring into the waterfall's shimmering glow. He lifted one clawed hand, staring at the faint warmth where she had touched him. For the first time in centuries, he did not feel like a monster. He felt seen. Ilara returned to the forest as the moon waxed again. Each visit felt less like trespass and more like surrender. The path knew her steps now. The mists curled aside when she passed. Somewhere deep in the ancient dark, The beast waited not as a hunter, but as one who no longer believed anyone would come. The waterfall's song greeted her first. She found him seated near its base, claws resting on his knees, eyes dimmed to ember gold. For a heartbeat she thought he might not notice her. Then the air shifted, his head lifted, and that gaze found her as surely as a magnet finds iron. "You return," he murmured. "You said I owed a debt. Most debts are paid in coin, few in courage." She smiled faintly. "Then count this bravery enough for two." A low sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "You speak as though you know me." "Perhaps I'm learning." She set her lantern between them, the light through their shadows. On the wet stone wall, the outline of a girl and something vast beside her, tethered by a single glow. Days blurred into nights, nights into a rhythm. She came to tend the lair, brushing moss from runes, gathering herbs that grew in the damp stone cracks, bringing bread or fruit she claimed were offerings. He never ate them, but the gesture pleased him in a way he didn't name. In return, he told her stories. Once he had been Therian, knight of the Moonvale court. He spoke of silver banners, of a goddess who wove light into armor and gave him a heart made for war, and love he was forbidden to keep. His voice, deep and resonant, wrapped the tales in sorrow. "The goddess cursed me," he said one night, "because I chose mortal affection over divine duty." Ilira's fingers tightened around her cup. "So the curse is punishment for love, for believing I deserved it." Silence pressed between them. Then she reached across the stone and, with trembling hand, brushed the back of his claw. His skin was rough as bark, warm as sunlit stone. The smallest touch, yet the sound he made was a shuddering exhale, almost human. "You are not undeserving," she whispered. He turned toward her, the lamplight catching the planes of his face scales, glimmering like tarnished silver, eyes darkened by something close to hunger or need. "Do not say that," he said hoarsely. "The forest listens. It punishes hope." "Let it," she replied. "Hope keeps me here." He stared at her for a long time, then rose to his full height. The air between them changed. Cold water spray mingled with the warmth of his breath. Slowly, he extended one talon and drew a single glowing line in the air, an old sigil, burning faint blue. "A pact," he said, "a bond of silence and trust. Break it." Her pulse quickened, yet she nodded. "Then I am yours to trust." Their hands, claw and palm, met within the symbol's glow. The sigil sank into their skin like moonlight dissolving in water. When the light faded, a faint mark shimmered at her wrist, a half-moon veined with silver. She felt his power hum beneath her skin, a heartbeat answering his. "What have you done to me?" she breathed. "Bound us," he said quietly, "so that neither is alone again." For a moment she couldn't speak. Then, softly, "Does it hurt?" "Only when you're far." He turned away then, as if the admission cost him. She stepped forward, compelled, and laid her hand on the ridge of his back, just above the scar where his wing was chained. His muscles tensed, but he didn't move. The waterfall thundered around them. Her hair clung to her cheeks. His breath stirred the strands. "Tell me what you see when you look at me," she said. He hesitated. "Light in a place that forgot it." "And you?" she asked. "I am the dark that envies it." Her eyes softened. "Then maybe we can teach each other." He turned slightly, close enough that the edge of his muzzle brushed her temple. The warmth of him was overwhelming, the scent of rain and smoke filling her lungs. Every heartbeat thundered with the ache of something they could not name. "Careful, healer," he whispered. "You stand where curses are born." "Or broken," she said. That night she left later than ever, lantern nearly spent. At the forest's edge she looked back once. Tharion still stood in the mouth of his cave. The glow of her fading light reflected in his eyes. For the first time in centuries, he bowed his head not to a goddess, but to a mortal girl who dared to touch the darkness, and above them the moon burned brighter, as though watching a story repeat itself, one written in shadow, sealed with hope. Seasons inside the moon veil do not turn as they do beyond its borders. They fold and breathe like dreams. In that shifting twilight, Elara's visits became the pulse of time itself. With each one, the forest stirred from centuries of stillness, and the beast who had once been a man began, piece by piece, to remember the cadence of a heartbeat. The lair changed first. Where stone had sweated with cold, pale moss began to glow with an inner warmth, spreading like spilled starlight. Water dripping from the high vaults sang in clearer tones, and the runes that once guarded the cavern dimmed their warning and shimmered. Instead, like watchful eyes, even the air softened. It carried no longer the scent of rust and grief, but the damp sweetness of living earth. Tharion moved through this reborn world with the slowness of a creature, half dreaming. The chains at his shoulder no longer clanged as he breathed, and sometimes, when the moon hung low, enough to touch the falls with silver his shadow seemed almost human. Yet it was Elara who bore the heavier wonder, for the magic that had marked her wrist began to wake beneath her skin. It hummed when she crossed the forest's threshold, and in her sleep it drew visions of flame and wings and a lonely figure walking among stars. She did not fight the bond. Love, though unspoken, had woven itself through every quiet act. The way she mended the torn leather that still clung to his armor, the way she placed offerings of fire flowers in the cracks of his stone throne, the way she stood close enough for her warmth to chase the chill from his breath. It was devotion born not of innocence, but of understanding one, soul seeing its reflection in another's ruin. The forest watched, trees bowed their crowns when she passed. Ravens whispered her name into the dark. From the moon itself fell threads of pale light, seeking the two bound hearts below, as though the heavens wished to witness the defiance that grew between them. Yet the same light carried omen, for love in cursed soil blooms brightest before it burns. On a night heavy with rain, the forest trembled. Thunder rolled like the drums of forgotten armies. Within the lair, Elara tended the fire while Tharion lay near its glow, his form half shrouded in mist. When she brushed her fingers over the scar at his wing, the chain cracked. Once just a breath of sound, but the echo rang through every tree in moon. Old magic stirred, ancient and jealous. The runes along the walls flickered as though tasting danger. Still, the touch remained, the healer's hand against the creature's wound, the curse humming its protest, the heart denying it. In that fragile balance, trust was forged, something more binding than the sigil that glowed upon their skin. It was not spoken, 4 words would have lessened it. It simply was, a silence full of promises neither dared to name. Days followed, like sighs. The villagers forgot the beast's legend. Hunters no longer dared the fog. In their place came birds whose feathers gleamed with silver edges, and at the river's edge lilies bloomed out of season. Beneath such omens, Therion walked beside Ilara, beneath the dripping boughs. She could feel the tremor of the earth beneath each step he took, and he could feel the fragile rhythm of her pulsa music. He feared to love, yet could not silence, and always, above them, the moon watched an unblinking eye, patient as judgment. When the first frost of autumn crept through the glade, Therion climbed to the ridge above his cavern and looked upon the valley. He saw the village lamps far below, tiny sparks scattered like memories. For the first time in an age, he felt not hatred, but longing for that small, brief world of mortals. Behind him, in the hush of falling snow, Ilara followed, her cloak brushing the prints of his talons until they were indistinguishable. They stood together at the cliff's edge. Around them, the wind carried the scent of ice and pine. Within them, a sorrow older than the forest itself. The curse did not break, but for that moment it bent, and through the crack poured light enough to make the night blush. It was said later that the moon hung lower that night, that its reflection touched the waterfall and set it ablaze with silver fire. Those who wandered near the forest's edge swore. They heard a sound like wings, unfolding vast and weary, and a woman's heartbeat answering from the dark. Thus the Moonveil remembered the brief hour when trust became love and love became prophecy. For every curse has its moment of mercy, as every dawn has its shadow. And the forest, ancient and merciful, chose to keep that secret a little while longer. The peace that had settled over the Moonveil did not last. For a time it seemed as though the curse had grown weary, as if love itself could lull it into sleep. But old magic does not forgive easily, and the forest was older than memory. Beneath its roots, something ancient began to stir low pulse, like a heartbeat echoing through the stones. At first, it was the wind that changed. It carried whispers that did not belong to any voice of the living, and the silver leaves began to tremble even when the air was still. Shadows moved against the moonlight, and the glow within the mossy cavern dimmed as if swallowed by unseen hands. Therion felt it first. The calm he had known in Ilora's presence began to break apart. The metal that had once bound him shivered and grew hot, and the runes carved into his armor flared with light. His eyes, those molten, haunted embers, burned brighter, almost painfully so. The human within him clawed for control, while the monster beneath his skin howled to be free. The forest mirrored his torment. Trees bent until their trunks cracked. Water turned dark and fast. Birds scattered, vanishing into the sky. Every place Ilara had touched the soft moss. The path by the waterfall began to fade, as if time itself was being rewritten. Ilara tried to stand against it. She felt the same magic that had once linked them, now thrashing in her veins, pulling her toward him and pushing her away in the same breath. Her skin burned where the mark of the Moonveil glowed, and her heart pounded with a rhythm that was not entirely her own. Still, she refused to step back. When she reached Therion's side, the cavern was filled with wild light. The air smelled of thunder and iron. He knelt before the fire, his body trembling, wings half unfurled, eyes wide with fear. the kind that belongs to both man and beast. She placed her hands against his chest, and the world seemed to hold its breath. A crack spread through the floor, glowing from within. Out of it rose shapes echoes of the souls the curse had devoured. They moved like smoke, their faces familiar, and lost all at once. The curse was showing him what it had taken. 100 lifetimes of loneliness, rage, and grief surged through the chamber, and Therion roared a sound that shattered the silence of the valley below. The villagers woke to the storm that night. They saw the sky above the moonveil twist and burn, and they whispered that the beast had returned. Some prayed, others packed to flee, but none dared cross the mist. Only the moon stood still, pale and watchful. Inside the storm, Ilara held on. She spoke no words, but her thoughts reached him memories of laughter, of the firelight that had once warmed them, of the peace they had stolen from the world. For a heartbeat, the storm faltered. The monster's breath slowed. His gaze found hers, and something human flickered in it once more. But mercy comes at a price. The curse denied its due, turned its fury upon her. The mark on her wrist blazed until her skin cracked with light, and her knees gave way. Therion caught her before she fell, but his touch burned. It was the moment the curse had waited for, the bond complete. The love confessed, not in words, but in sacrifice. The chains shattered. The roar that followed rolled across the mountains, breaking trees and stone. For an instant, Therion stood free. His form shifted, half-man. Wings spread wide enough to blot the stars. The beauty of it was terrible. He looked both divine and damned. Then he turned to Ilara. She lay still, her breath thin, her hand outstretched. He gathered her up, holding her as though he feared she might turn to ash in his arms. The curse demanded her life to seal its power, but Therion had been cursed long enough to know defiance. He rose on wings of shadow and silver fire, carrying her toward the moon. The storm followed, the forest crying out as the magic that had bound it for centuries tore loose. The waterfall exploded into mist, and the light of the moon broke into shards across the sky. When dawn came, the storm was gone. The valley lay silent. The moonveil had changed, trees darker, its air heavy with the scent of ash and lilies. Some say they saw a figure carved in stone atop the ridge, a woman in a cloak of petals, held in the arms of a winged beast, both faces lifted toward the sky. Others say they vanished entirely, leaving behind only a feather made of silver glass. Whatever truth survived, the moonveil kept it close. The curse was not gone, but it slept, again, deeper than before, its hunger sated by a love that refused to break, even in ruin. And when the wind passed through the forest on moonlit nights, it carried a voice like a lullaby, soft, sorrowful, and eternal. When the storm finally slept, the world seemed to forget how to breathe. The moonveil lay in silence. Its trees bowed as though mourning, their roots drinking from soil still warm with magic. The waterfall, once roaring, had thinned to a silver whisper. Mist hung over the valley, veiling the scars left behind by the curse's fury. Days passed, and the villagers crept once more to the forest's edge. They found the paths changed. The moss no longer glowed, the air colder, the shadows deeper. Yet the sense of terror was gone. In its place lingered something stranger, reverence. The old fear had become awe, as though the forest had been hallowed by what it had witnessed. They spoke of the statue first, the one upon the ridge, a woman cradled in the arms of a winged creature, both carved from a single block of stone, faces turned toward the moon. It was too perfect to be mortal work. Each petal on the woman's cloak, each scale upon the beast's wing, shimmered faintly in the light, as though alive. None dared touch it, for fear the figures might stir and breathe again. Seasons turned, and legends grew around that silent pair. Some said they were lovers, punished for defying the gods. Others whispered that they still dreamed beneath the stone, their hearts beating in time with the moon. Children left flowers at their feet, and hunters swore no beast dared cross the ridge again. Whatever power had ruled the Moonvale had quieted, but it had not died. Then, one spring night, the moon bled gold instead of silver. Its light washed over the statue, and a faint tremor ran through the earth. A single crack appeared across the woman's wrist, small as a breath, and from it spilled a thread of light, bright as dawn. The next morning, where the crack had been, a bloom had grown, a lily of translucent glass, its stem pulsing faintly with warmth. No one knew what it meant. Some called it a blessing, others a warning. But the forest began to heal. The rivers cleared, and the trees shed their blackened bark to reveal new growth beneath. Animals returned, timid and quiet. The Moonvale had been remade gentler, though its beauty carried a shadow that never fully left. Generations passed. The ridge weathered wind and rain, yet the statue remained untouched. Travelers who lost their way in the forest sometimes claimed to see a flicker of movement near the waterfall, a faint light like wings unfolding, or a woman's reflection bending over still water. Most dismissed such tales as fancies, but the oldest among them only smiled and said that love, once given, never truly dies. It only changes its form. And so it was that the legend endured. The villagers told their children that the beast was no longer cursed but watching, guardian of the Moonvale, protector of the light that had once saved him. And the woman, they said, had become its heart, her spirit woven through every tree, every spark of starlight caught in the mist. When the wind blew through the valley, it carried a sound like laughter, soft and fleeting. When the rain fell, it tasted faintly of salt, as if the sky still remembered tears. At times, under the full moon, the statue seemed to shimmer. Those who stood close enough swore they heard a heartbeat echoing faintly from within the stone. Once, a child who dared to lay her hand upon the lily swore she felt warmth, and a whisper brushed her ear. Do not mourn the dark, for even shadows remember the sun. The tale of Therion and Ilara passed from myth into memory, then from memory into legend. Yet the Moonvale still glowed faintly on certain nights, as though something within refused to fade entirely. Perhaps it was love, perhaps it was magic, or perhaps there was never any difference between the two. And in that forest where sorrow and beauty had met, life continued, gentler, quieter, but touched forever by what had been lost and what had been found again.